All right, hello everyone. Eric Marks, findingmiddleearth.com, and today I'm going to be doing a pretty interesting little comparison on a photo that I've never touched before. And I'm going to be using two different RAW processors. So I've been getting a lot of requests come in on doing a video about On1 Photo RAW because it's this new software, and a lot of people are saying that it works really well with the Fuji RAW files. And so a lot of Fujifilm shooters have been emailing me asking me if I've used it. Yes, I've been messing around with it. But today we're going to actually directly compare it to Lightroom CC, the newest version of Lightroom, and I'll be using obviously the newest version of On1. Today actually, which is Valentine's Day, February 14th, this evening On1 actually emailed out a brand new update, this big update to On1 Photo RAW. So I've already downloaded the update. I'm just waiting to see if it's going to act any different with the colors, or it said that the overall processor and the processor engine kind of got a little lift on the update. So anyway, we're going to see how that handles the Fujifilm files, and we're going to see how Lightroom handles this one file. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we get started on this photo, let's go ahead and just take a look at how basically the preliminary look of how this photo looks in both softwares. So this is Lightroom CC, and this is how the photo looks. So just look at it for a second. The colors are a little, muted from what I remember them being. Everything's pretty dark down here. And by the way, the reason that I took this photo, I knew this was going to be a terrible photo. I took it because I knew it was going to be a really good dynamic range test for the Fujifilm RAW files. I wanted to see how much shadow recovery that I could dig out of the RAW file. So pay no mind to the photo. I know it's just a terrible photo. Okay, so this is what Lightroom has to do with the photo. So let's go ahead and hop over to Photo RAW. So, whoa, immediately I can tell the colors are much more saturated, and the highlights up here in the sky are actually pretty burnt out. I don't think they were like that in Lightroom. Let's hop back over and check it out. Yeah, so you see over here in Lightroom at the 100% view, they're not burnt out really. I mean, they're a little bit, you can see here, but I mean, just a tad bit of highlight recovery kind of pulls that right back. But back in Photo RAW, they looked really burnt out and much more saturated. Let's go back to Photo RAW. We'll go back to Fit, and yeah, look how more saturated and how much of the highlights are burnt out in this. So that's interesting to see right off the bat. As far as the rest of the photo, it definitely looks about the same darkness level, and from what I can see, the sky looks a little more blue in this On1 Photo RAW, and over here it just looks a little more muted altogether. Everything just looks a little less saturated, which is kind of how a RAW file is supposed to look. So, by the way, before we go any further, I do want to say thank you to the folks at On1 for giving me a free copy of On1 Photo RAW. They were kind enough to just send me a copy for free. They sent me like the full version with all the presets and all the extras and bells and whistles. So thank you so much to the folks at On1 for allowing me to have a free copy and basically making this video possible. So thank you guys. They're not sponsoring the video. They're not sponsored, I promise. I'm not being paid to do this. They just simply sent me a free copy because they're cool. So anyway, by the way, because of that, I just wanted to say that because this is going to be a very unbiased comparison. So if I have some bad stuff to say about On1 Photo RAW, don't think that one company or the other is paying me to say, whatever I'm going to say. So yeah, because right off the bat, I actually don't really like the way On1 Photo RAW looks. It's blowing out too much of the highlights for my taste. So let's just see how much we can gather out of this RAW file. So let's start with Lightroom, okay? Let's just bump the shadows up to 100%. So there's that, okay? We got back, a fair amount of detail. It's not a crazy amount, but it's a fair amount of detail, okay? And let's go ahead and do a 100% view on the house because I think that's where I focused. And, that's not bad. It is a little bit noisy, which you can expect because we've probably recovered about a stop and a half of light here. And, there's a decent amount of detail there. I can see each cow. I can see the power lines back here. I can obviously make out that there's a couple of trucks over here. So, yeah, it's not bad at all. Obviously, we can play with this more by boosting the exposure. So let's also crank down the highlights. Okay, see what that gives us. That's actually a really nice effect with the highlights. That pulled them back brilliantly in Lightroom here. Yeah, let's go ahead and get this info off the screen so we can see everything. Yeah, so actually the highlights did wonders on that. I pulled the whole sky back and made everything super nice and creamy. So I like that. We just need more here. So let's go ahead and hop over to Photo Raw for a second and do the same thing. So let's bump the shadows. Whoa, did you guys see that? Wow, that like brought back like 3 stops of light. That might even be too much exposure. Look at that. Okay, so take a look at this, what the shadows did in On1 Photo Raw. Okay, let's go back to Lightroom. That's all it did in Lightroom. It just brought back a tiny little bit of light. Wow. Okay, so let's take a look at the detail. Let's zoom in. Okay, so immediately I can actually tell a detail difference too. On1 Photo Raw isn't quite as noisy and mushy. It actually provides a really good amount of detail on the barn. I can see the cows way more clearly. I can see everything way more clearly. It's almost like I got a resolution bump. Like it's really, really good detail compared to the other one. I would actually be way more willing to post something like this on the blog versus what Lightroom is giving me right now before sharpening. Because right now there's no sharpening or anything applied to this image. You're seeing me process this completely raw right out of the camera. So yeah, that's a little funky that On1 Photo Raw is able to bring out that much more light. I mean, look at that. This is about what Lightroom did, about right there. And we're at 28% in Photo Raw. If we go there, I mean, it's just like a whole different photo. So, okay, so let's just go about here, because that's about what I would do. And then let's play with the highlights. Let's see what that does in Photo Raw. Ugh, gross. Yeah, so that needs some improving. If the folks at On1 are watching this, I'll say that your detail and your shadow recovery is pure magic. I mean, that worked amazing, but the highlights need some work. You know, it seems like it's not really affecting much of the sky. It's just affecting the big blobby, you know, white parts, and it's just kind of smushing them down into a gross, you know, very basically a recovered mess. It's just, I don't know. That's gross. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of the highlight slider in here. I don't really like that. So let's go ahead and reset the highlights, and let's see if we can bring that down with some exposure. So let's do that. Let's go over here in On1, okay? Grab their gradient thing here. All right, the gradient filter. We'll soften it up a bit. We'll do something like that, okay? So, you know, that's not bad, but it's still, I'm having trouble getting back the highlights. Let's go back to the overall settings here. Yeah, I'm just having trouble getting back this area, this blown out highlight part. You know, it's not a deal breaker for me because obviously in real life, this area would be quite blown out to our human eyes. But, you know, if you go back over here to Lightroom, look how nicely the highlight slider did everything. This is, the way it came out of the camera, and then, I mean, look at that. That's a really beautiful recovery. It doesn't mush anything up. It just looks, and it affects the whole sky, you know, instead of just those big parts. I don't even need a grad filter in this one. It just affects everything, and it's actually really beautiful. So it's funny because so far we've realized that Lightroom CC handles highlights in the top part of the image very well, but it doesn't handle the bottom part of the image very well. There's less detail in Lightroom, and there's less shadow recovery in Lightroom. So if I could take the shadow recovery from On1 and the highlight recovery from Lightroom, hey, I would have a perfect little software. So why don't we create something called Lightroom Photo Raw? Come on, everybody, get the folks in On1 and Adobe to get together and work on this, because that would be great. If I had the shadows from On1 and the highlights from Lightroom, I'd be good to go. So far, you know, those are impressive, but they're separate softwares. That gets on my nerves because I don't want to have to go back and forth between a million raw processors to get a good processed file. Okay, so let's go back into Photo Raw, and keep in mind I've done no color yet. I've done no white balance, no vibrance or saturation, and those colors are just bugging me. They're really, really hot. So I might have to go back on the saturation a little bit. Let's see what that does. Okay, so it's handling it okay, but I mean that's just weird that I'm having to go back on the saturation and vibrance. Yeah, it's kind of hard to process this image because I would never post this photo. I don't think it's very good, but still, nonetheless, I'm checking out their white balance here. Let's add a little bit of magenta. Okay, some warm colors in there, a little bit of contrast. Let's see what that does. Okay, so I'm very used to the contrast in Lightroom and I hate it. So I already like the contrast better in On1 Photo Raw because it doesn't just crush the blacks everywhere. It actually adds a nice little crispness to the photo. If you go over here back in Lightroom, first let's go ahead and fix this area. Let's paint in some light. Where are we at here? Let's get the adjustment brush and make it just like it is over in On1 Photo Raw. Let's just paint in some exposure to make it somewhat equal to the way it looks in Photo Raw. Okay, we don't have to get it perfect. I just want it, to be somewhat like that. So we'll make it something like that. All right, tone it down a little bit. All right, so we'll just say that is close enough. Let's zoom in again. Yeah, I'm not liking the detail in Lightroom. I mean, it's not bad, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely way more structured and way more, the pixels hold together better over in On1 Photo Raw, at least for this section. Obviously, I hate the highlight recovery over in Photo Raw. So, okay, but now that they're about the same, let's do the contrast thing here. So you can see it in Lightroom, it just kind of, I don't know, it makes everything more saturated and it's making those mountains in the back really blue. And it's kind of darkening everything. So let's go back over to Photo Raw and you can compare. Let's add that contrast back in. So see how it's not really darkening the stuff that's already light. It's just kind of skipping over the highlights and darkening the blacks and just crispening those up a little more. Let's look at the comparison. You can see like the house here, is way more dark when you pump the contrast. And over here in Photo Raw, we have a little more, it's just a little more natural the way the light tones are hitting. It's not quite as, quite as strong. There still preserves a nice amount of highlight. Now, obviously, anyway with the contrast, if you go all the way, in either software, it's going to make everything insanely dark, like that. So, yeah, contrast, I don't think one is better over the other. I mean, I think they're both okay. I do my contrast in Photoshop, so I would never use that here anyway, but it's fun to compare them. So now let's do the blacks, because this is something I'm used to working with the whites and the blacks in Lightroom to get my contrast, just to get kind of a base contrast before I do my dodging and burning contrast in Photoshop. So let's do that. Let's play with the blacks here in Photo Raw. Let's bring them up a little bit. What in the world is that? So typically in Lightroom, I'm used to the blacks like boosting the overall exposure and like bringing out the shadows a little bit. But this looks like you're taking the dehaze tool and going to the left. It looks like you're adding haze. Not sure why it's doing that. So let's go down. Okay, so down is, is what I'm used to. It's crispening the blacks, but what in the world is that? Let's go over to Lightroom. Check this out. You see that? How it's just brightening the photo? It's not adding this like white hazy film to it in Lightroom. So that's something interesting to compare. Look at that. The blacks up and down. Let's take the blacks all the way up in Lightroom. Look at that. That's just, it just looks a little too bright, but it doesn't look abnormal. Go over to On1 Photo Raw. That looks abnormal. That just looks like a hazy photo. It looks like a bunch of fog just creeped across the valley there. So that's a little weird. I don't like the black slider. That's what that tells me. Let's kill that. Let's play with the whites. Let's see if those... Ooh, okay, so the whites are actually pretty beautiful. Aha! Okay, so I've just discovered the way On1 Photo Raw likes to recover highlights. Not through the highlight slider, through the white slider. Look at that. Watch the sky there with the white slider here in On1 Photo Raw. Way better than the highlight slider. That actually finally recovers the white blobs there in the sky. Okay. So now I know. So stay away from the highlight slider, use the white slider. That's where I'm going to get the best recovery there. Okay, so that's actually pretty good. Stay away from the black slider as well. That's a little funky unless you go to the left. If you crispen the blacks, it's fine. But if you go up with it, man, that just looks so bad. Okay, so what have we learned so far while we're messing with this? We've learned the shadows are amazing in On1 Photo Raw, like really amazing. Contrast is good. The contrast in Photo Raw is a little bit better than Lightroom. Highlights are terrible in On1 Photo Raw. The highlight recovery is just gross. I'd have to play around with it with more photos, but in this one it's terrible. And the blacks are terrible, but the white slider is the way to get your highlights back. So I'm discovering here. Okay, and then also On1 Photo Raw seems to give the shadow areas a little more detail than Lightroom does. So it's kind of a sucky thing so far because some of the things that On1 Photo Raw does better than Lightroom are like really big make it break it decisions. You know, they're like right off the bat, if it gives more detail in the shadows, I want to use On1 Photo Raw. But at the same time, you know, the black slider and the highlight slider are kind of screwing things up for me. So, you know, I wish one of the two companies would fix some of the things that are getting on photographers' nerves and make this kind of one software to rule them all. I might contact a company and see if we can work on a software together. I just got that idea. Why not? Because I know what I want. I already know. I've used so many photo softwares and processors that I know everything about them that I would change, and we should just, you know, it makes you wonder why they don't do it, why they don't create this big mass poll and ask photographers what's wrong with their software. They just, I don't know. So yeah, anyway, let's get back to the video. So far it's a very interesting comparison. Let's go into 100% view again in Photo Raw here. Okay, so still looking good on the detail. Let's do some sharpening. Let's go over here to where it says show more. Go to sharpening, because Lightroom sharpening is terrible. So let's see what this does. Let's go to sharpening amount here. I guess that's what this is. Okay, look, so you can choose. Now that's nice. Lightroom does not allow you to do this. Look, there's screen sharpening, print sharpening, which, by the way, since this is On1 Photo Raw, you have the resize software built in here. If you saw my last video, or not my last video, but a few videos ago, where I did the big, like, how to prep your photos for print video, I use On1 Resize, which is a magic software. So now it's built in to Photo Raw here. And look, there's an actual print area for sharpening. That is nice. I wish Lightroom had that. So there's fixed focus, there's screen, and print. So I'll probably do... why not screen? Because I'm going to be sharing this on the web for right now, even though I'm not going to share this specific photo. But look, you can actually choose high pass, progressive, unsharp mask. So we'll do high pass because that's what I normally do over in Photoshop. And let's just play around with it and see what it does. So look at that. That's actually really good. I'm up at like 95% right now, and that seems to be working wonders on the contour of the image, where all the edges and stuff, it's sharpening. Yeah, that's nice. All the cowls and the power lines and the barn here just got a nice little lift and sharpening. Even the road, I can tell, is way sharper. Let's kill the sharpness here. Okay, there we go. And then let's go all the way back up. I mean, you can just see that's without and with sharpening. Without and with. And that's just like, I mean, that adds a bunch of detail. So, okay. So immediately I can tell you on the Fuji RAW files, On1 Photo Raw sharpening, beautiful. Beautiful compared to Lightroom. Lightroom just mushes it. So we'll go ahead and show you that right now. Let's go over to Lightroom. Let's do a 100% view. We'll bring those blacks back down a little bit to where it's normal again. Okay, and let's go to sharpening here. I know this is going to add a bunch of noise. Where's my sharpening at? Let's see. You'd think I've never used this before. Okay, sharpening. Let's go about 95% where we were on Photo Raw. Look at that. There's banding in the image. I can actually already see banding right in the image. It's terrible. All these little grid patterns start to show up. Ugh. I don't like it. It's like instead of sharpening, it adds film grain or something. It's just bad. It mushes everything together. The trees mush together. Look, it's got these little halos around the tree limbs here. Okay. Yeah, man, that's not looking good. I do not like that. So yeah, I'm going to kill the sharpening there. Obviously, as I already expected, On1 Photo Raw sharpening, killer. Lightroom, terrible. Yeah, so I don't know what else to test here in this video because I wanted to keep this relatively short. But I'll do these, you know, once or twice a week. I'll do these little software comparison tests just on different photos, so you guys can get an idea for how it looks with waterfalls and sunsets and really dark photos, really bright photos. But I just wanted to do this, you know, tonight so you guys could see the difference here in these RAW processors, because a lot of people are wondering on the Fuji RAW files what is like that best software that handles them the best. So it looks like you need kind of a collective effort from all these raw processors to get together and talk and make this one perfect software to rule them all. Because right now, Lightroom has some issues and Photo Raw has some issues. But Photo Raw has been enjoyable to play around with. I mean, honestly, it's been really fun. I love the layout. It's a very fun, like whimsical layout. It's just like kind of fun to use. And Lightroom is more like an old Windows program from the 70s. So yeah, my final kind of result right now in this photo is that I would still probably choose to process it in Lightroom and then shoot it to Photoshop. And then obviously I would use the some On1 plugins for presets if I had to, but I would still probably stick with Lightroom at the current moment when it comes to Lightroom versus Photo Raw. But that's just for this photo. You know, this is the only one I've done so far like this with a direct comparison. So I'm going to do more testing, and I'll make videos on that, I promise, so you guys can test it along with me here. And the next test, we'll do some tests on Capture One Pro 10 down here, which I have. But I didn't want to do like 3 comparisons yet because I'm still kind of learning Photo Raw. And Capture One Pro, the interface just is not very user-friendly. It's kind of still confusing to me, so I'm still trying to get used to Capture One. But yeah, in this case, I would still probably use Lightroom mainly because of the color, the highlight, and just how it handles the sky. The sunset is kind of the star of this image, and so the highlight slider here in Lightroom did a brilliant job at making sure that still looks good, nice and nice and even with the lighting instead of just crunching certain parts of the highlights. So yeah, if you guys have any questions at all, or if you have experiences with these softwares and you've experienced something different than I have, let me know. We can start a fun conversation with it in the comments. And thank you guys for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next one. If you would like to stay up to date on all of my latest photography videos and adventures, click the big subscribe button below. And if you would like to find out more about me and how to become a great photographer, visit my website at findingmiddleearth.com.